Hello and welcome everybody to today's episode of the JBA All-In Podcast.
Our podcast is currently streaming on Podbean and YouTube. The JBA All-In Podcast is your one-stop sports shop podcast for news around the sports world.
My name is Jack.
My name is Brendan.
And we are very excited to bring you the newest breaking news in the sports world. We have a very packed lineup of segments today, so let's jump right in.
All right, it's time for the hot topic, everybody. You all probably saw the Houston Astros Los Angeles Dodgers games of the past two nights. But the most eventful thing that went on was in that bottom of the sixth inning in that first game where Joe Kelly had Alex Bregman in a 3-0 count and threw behind his head. And Alex Bregman, he didn't do anything at first, but then later on in the inning, Joe Kelly ended up throwing at Correa, and then he struck him out. Him and Correa exchanged some words. There was some taunting going on, but Correa was taunting Cody Bellinger that game as well. So I think he had it coming. What are your thoughts on the tension between the two teams, Jack?
I think Joe Kelly is not the hero we deserved, but the hero that we needed. He was the first man to really step up against the Astros in this season of Corona. And, it was entertaining, but I think throwing anywhere near someone's head is not safe. It's kind of a disgrace to baseball. Even though, obviously, I suppose what Joe Kelly did, I don't think you should have thrown straight towards their head because no matter what they did, if you get a ball straight to your head, like a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, that can be bad. I think just pegging Bregman in like the rib area, that's fine. But I think how the MLB handled it was really stupid. Correa was being a jerk towards Bellinger and Joe Kelly the entire game. Joe Kelly makes a pouty face and the bench is clear. And Joe Kelly gets suspended for, I believe, 8 games. And Correa gets nothing. Joe Kelly, for making a pouty baby face, got more punishment than the Astros did for cheating in the 2017 World Series and the 2017 season, which is outrageous. And then our manager, Dave Roberts, also gets suspended for a game, which is completely stupid. I feel like the MLB is just protecting the Astros at this point and punishing the teams that really got robbed.
Yeah, I agree with you. Joe Kelly got suspended 8 games, which is 8 games more than any of the Astros players did for knowingly cheating their way to a World Series title. Also, getting suspended 8 games in this shortened season is equivalent to being suspended 21.6, so we'll just round up and say 22, equivalent to games suspended for 22 games in a regular 162-game season, which is really interesting to me. To say that Joe Kelly only made a pouty face isn't necessarily true, but him and Correa exchanged words, but it was pretty. They both said stuff, so it really wasn't like Joe Kelly was like bullying him in any way. Correa was also going at him as well. Cause Correa that game had been, kind of getting on Bellinger. He stared him down after his home run when he was rounding the bases, and he also threw him out and pointed at him, then in the back of the dugout and said, "Go out." So, he had it coming. I'm not necessarily saying that he had the pitch thrown at his head coming, but like the taunting that Joe Kelly did coming. And, Joe Kelly, he's really standing up, not just for like the Dodgers or like the Dodgers fans. He's really standing up for the entirety of the MLB, which is really nice to see, And then also Joe Kelly, like you said, he's become a fan favorite now for honestly not just Dodgers fans and Dodger players around the MLB and fans around the MLB. Maybe not from the Astros, but from other teams, And I think it's just really, I think he handled it well, with the exception of throwing at their head. Maybe throw him between the numbers, that's fine. Head is a little bit more, I understand the suspension in the sense that I understand the suspension, not the duration of the suspension, but the suspension in general being that he threw at the head. I understand maybe like 2 or 3 games would have been reasonable, except because of the shortened season. But the only problem I have with it is that that he really shouldn't be getting suspended if they didn't suspend Astros players.
Yeah.
They got off scot-free, which was kind of stupid. The Astros probably I would honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if other teams started throwing at them after what Joe Kelly did, which is another reason why I think he's getting from all the respect that people were showing him, I wouldn't be surprised if other pitchers started to throw at the Astros. But I think Joe Kelly is honestly, he's become one of my favorite players now, standing up for the Dodgers. Even though he wasn't even on the 2017 team, he still stand up for them, and he's become a fan favorite for a lot of people.
Adding on, I don't really like the idea of like throwing at a player, but like you said, throwing in between the numbers is probably fine. Like I think it's just kind of violent and unnecessary, but I'll admit I think it's kind of entertaining seeing the beef going on. But the fact that Joe Kelly gets suspended for 8 games and the Astros don't get any punishment at all, even with cheating and even with Correa doing what he did in that game, that's just kind of stupid. And I think it's being handled very poorly. And I think the MLB should probably reconsider the punishment and what they're doing.
I think a little bit of like trash talk between the players is fine, even if it gets like heated like that. I mean, obviously got pretty heated, but nothing got physical. I think if you're really thinking about it and looking down into it, if you're looking at why the MLB suspended him, really the only logical reasons they really suspended was for throwing at the players and specifically their heads. Um,
Yeah,
which I mean, I don't know. I think it deserves a suspension, not as long as that, especially in the shortened season, because, like I said, it's equivalent to almost 22 games, which is quite a bit in a regular season. But you know, the MLB is, they'll do what they do, and I still think the Dodgers are probably gonna still have a really good season, win their division, probably make it out of the NL. Still.
yeah, I agree.
Moving on, Joey Bosa with the Chargers just signed a massive record-breaking deal. The Chargers have locked him up for a long time. You are a Chargers fan, Jack. How do you feel about this deal?
I'm stoked for this deal because Joey Bosa is still young and he's a very amazing, talented player. I think this is just one step closer for the Chargers to become a great team because we have a young defensive core with Joey Bosa, Derwin James, and now adding someone like Kenneth Murray who could possibly break out and be a really good player. I think adding on to our defense that's already pretty powerful is really good and locking him up. Now, really, all we need to do is lock up Derwin, and we should be good. But I think this deal, since we did have a lot of cap, doesn't really harm us that much because even though we don't have as much cap space as we did, because we used to have, I believe, the second most uh, cap space for 2021. Now we still have a lot of cap space, and we can still make a big splash in free agency, or obviously we sign Derwin James. But I think this is a really good deal for the Chargers, and it's going to help us out in the long run.
Yeah, it's a big contract. 5 years, $135 million. That's $27 million a year, which is a lot. That's more than some like elite caliber quarterbacks are getting. But Joey Bosa is, I mean, if you play Madden, don't let the rating fool you. He's one of the best pass rushers in the league. Coming from a non-Chargers fan here, and he's also still very young. Last season, he had 11.5 sacks, which is very impressive. And then he also in 2016 had 10.5 sacks. In 2017, had 12.5 sacks. And in 2018, he had his injury, still managed to pull out 5.5 sacks. Over his career, he has 40 sacks in 4 years. That's 10 sacks a year, which is very impressive. So he's definitely deserving of a big contract. And he's a great young player, and I'm happy for Chargers fans that they were able to lock him up. All right, now let's move into fast break news. First story for us today: 0 NBA players tested positive in the bubble for the second straight week, which is phenomenal. I personally think that the NBA is doing the best job of protecting their players and coaches from the COVID-19 virus. We've seen already in the MLB, 2 teams getting shut down for temporary shutdown due to an outbreak in the virus. And then also in the NFL, players are opting out, and it's not looking like they're going to have a full season this year. So I think the NBA is looking like it has the best chance of actually having like a complete season that doesn't have tons of players opting out or tons of teams having to be shut down. What do you think of the NBA bubble and how it's worked so far?
I think it's been great. Like you made the points on how other leagues are having players opt out and people getting affected. But apart from a few players breaking bubble protocol, For example, Lou Williams. I think they're doing an amazing job of keeping players in check in the bubble so they can finish out this season and eventually get to the playoffs. I applaud the NBA, Adam Silver. I applaud everything they're doing because it's going great. No one's tested positive. I think they're just handling it really well. They're really making sure that the season's going to go on and they won't have to have another stoppage. And I think this is just great for the game of basketball because we can keep watching the sport we all love safely, and the players are also safe. So overall, I think this is just great for the NBA.
Yeah, and also, people have been discussing about this NBA season, if whoever wins, if whoever comes out on top, I don't really think there should be an asterisk next to their name because really this season, it's not like they're going to end up playing teams with missing some important players or some teams are not going to have to play, stuff like that. That's happened in past years in other sports leagues. It's nothing like that. They're playing the 22 best teams in the NBA, and it's going to have the same playoff format it always does, with essentially with hopefully all the players on a team at a time, barring injury, because it looks like that's going to be the case with 0 NBA players testing positive now. So I think that really there should be no asterisk next to whoever comes on top out of these 22 teams, and I think they should get all the respect that they deserve if they win.
Yeah, because if anything, this makes it a lot harder. So there shouldn't be any asterisks because when you say asterisk, it usually means that or it was easier or they had something to push them forward, like the asterisk cheating scandal. But handling like the stress and pressure of COVID-19 or will just make it harder for the players. So I think overcoming like this virus and stuff and winning the championship is just a lot harder than normally. So there's should be no asterisk, and if people think that there is an asterisk, then they're pretty much just wrong.
All right, next up, Juan Soto was cleared to return to the Washington Nationals. How do you think this helps or hurts the Nationals?
I think this helps them because Juan Soto is probably one of the best players on the Nationals, and he's a really impactful player for the Nationals. And with the loss of Rendon, I think they're really going to need Juan Soto to step up if they want to go as far as they did last year. Which I don't think they're going to go as far as they did last year to the World Series. But Juan Soto really contributes to the team, so I think having Juan Soto back is a really important thing for the Nationals.
Yeah, and you mentioned about their success last year. That was after they lost their supposed best player in Bryce Harper, which says a lot about, you know, Bryce Harper and his in the way he fit on that team. I think that last year they just meshed all really well, and once they beat the Dodgers, I feel like it was like a kind of a clear path to the World Series for them. It was a lot well, not a clear path, a lot easier path to the World Series because with the undisputed best team in the NL for the past couple of years out of the way, it was a lot easier. And then they end up being the Astros in the World Series, very impressive. So they did great last year, but they also lost some pieces in the offseason this year, which were really good in the playoffs last year, which is why I think I mean, not to say they're going to miss the playoffs this year, but if they do make the playoffs, they're probably not going to go as far. But they still have a good chance of making the playoffs this year because, a lot more teams are going to be making it. They're currently sitting at 2-4. They're currently tied for last in their division with the Phillies, who have been shut down. So really, they're last in their division right now. I think Juan Soto coming back will really give them a boost of confidence and overall play, and they'll be able to jump back into the 500 or plus 500 record. All right, now we're going to talk about Damien Williams for the Kansas City Chiefs has opted out the 2020 NFL season due to the coronavirus. How does this affect the Chiefs, Jack?
So we all know that David Williams is an important part on the Chiefs. He's definitely an important part in the running game. I don't think this affects the Chiefs too much. Obviously, I think it's a big hit for the Chiefs, but they're such a stacked team that you can't really write them off with the loss of Damian Williams. They could just have another person step up because they do have Patrick Mahomes and an amazing wide receiver core. They also got Travis Kelce. They're just a stacked team overall. So obviously, this is still a hit to the Chiefs, but I don't think it affects them that much.
Yeah, it's definitely a hit. I think Daniel Williams is a really good pass catching back, and he was a big part during the Chiefs season last year, especially the playoffs in their offensive attack. But, they still have who, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the NFL right now, Patrick Mahomes, plus like you said, a good receiving core. Also, they've got that young rookie, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who they drafted with the 32nd pick in the first round in the draft, who, if all goes well and he plays like a first rounder, should at least somewhat minimize the blow of Damien Williams opting out. Can't expect him to be great in his first year as a rookie, but maybe during this year, if he plays well, he'll be able to somewhat minimize the impact. Moving on, the Knicks hired Tom Thibodeau to replace interim coach Mike Miller as the new head coach of New York. Tom Thibodeau, he's a good coach. I think this is good for the Knicks. He has a winning record in his career. I believe is just under 59%. He has over 350 wins and under 250 losses in his coaching career over his coaching seasons with Chicago Bulls and the Minnesota Timberwolves. Also, as just a coach in general, he has been to the postseason 19 times, including 3 trips to the NBA Finals and an NBA championship with Boston in 2008. Those were not as a head coach, but all coaches have an impact, and I think that he definitely has a lot of experience in having teams go to the playoffs and do well in the playoffs. So I think that's definitely good for Knicks who are young and who have not been to the playoffs in a long time. So I think he could really help them out. Obviously they still need the players. Everyone thought they were going to get like Zion, Kyrie, and KD, but that never happened. So, they're going to have to, the front office is going to have to do some good and, draft well and may hopefully sign a free agent or two that can make significant impact either this offseason or in the next couple of ones, and maybe even make some trades. They trade away Kristaps Porzingis. Maybe don't make trades like that, but make trades maybe that will benefit you instead of hurt you. All right. Let's move on to a new segment, another game called Contender or Pretender. In Contender or Pretender, we look at a team who has been playing really well recently, and we determine whether or not we think they're a legit contender or whether or not they're a pretender, and eventually they will fall back to earth. So today's team is the San Diego Padres in the MLB. The San Diego Padres are currently 4-2 and tied with the Dodgers and a half game behind the Rockies in the NL West, and they have been lighting it up. They've been on opening weekend. They were batted really, really well, and they blew out the Diamondbacks 3 out of 4 games. And then they're splitting the series right now with the Giants, and they play the Giants today at 6:45 p.m. But so far, they've been playing well. The Padres right now have 32 runs, which is 7th in the league. They have a on-base percentage that is second in the league of 35.9%. And also they have hit 8 home runs, which is 9th in the league. They are also top 20 in all of their other significant team stats. So, Jack, do you think that the Padres are a contender, or do you think that they are just a pretender?
Well, it's so early in the season that I can't really put my finger on it. I don't really know if they're going to be a contender or a pretender. I personally don't think that they're going to be a contender, but I don't think they're a horrible team either. In the past, the Padres had a rough couple of years, but I think the future's looking bright for them with obviously Fernando Tatis Jr. They've got Manny Machado, Eric Hosmer. I think that they've got a bright future, but I don't think this is the year where they really start to shine.
Yeah, I agree. The Padres are definitely they're a young team with a bright future. Their average age is around 27, I believe, which is one of the youngest in the league. And they've already got some good veteran stars in their team, like you mentioned. And I think that in the next couple of years, they're definitely going to be contending for a wild card, if not maybe a division title. But as for this year, I'm gonna say they're not a legitimate contender for their division, much less the World Series or NL chip. So I'm gonna say pretender on this one.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into our next segment of the game called Fact or Fiction. In Fact or Fiction, I will say three statements to Jack, and Jack will tell me whether or not he thinks they are fact or fiction, and then he will do the same back to me. So you can start. I'll read off some statements to you, and you tell me whether or not they're fact or fiction. First, fact or fiction. A player in the Lakers vs. Clippers game tonight, Thursday, July 30th, 2020, scores 25 or more points.
I think this is a tough one. Obviously, it's going to be a heated battle because it's the Battle of LA. But I think this is going to be more of like a team matchup instead of just one star player breaking out and scoring all the points. I think it's going to be a well-rounded matchup. But you never know with these two teams. They've got some high-scoring players. Obviously, the Lakers got LeBron and AD, and then the Clippers got Kawhi, Paul George. All four of those players can score well above 25 points than they have in their careers. But scoring for each team is going to be more distributed equally throughout the players. So I don't think 25 points plus would be a great estimate for a single player. But I think that there will be like stars in the game that perform well, but I think it's more of a team battle in this case than a single battle.
Yeah, so you're going fiction on this one?
I'm gonna go fiction.
Number two, fact or fiction. The 2020 NFL MVP was in the top 10 of NFL Network's top 100 players of 2020. The top 100 players of 2020 is a list voted on by the players according to NFL Network that airs on NFL Network. They count down the top 100 players over the course of 3 or 4 nights, and the last night they count down the top 10 in 2 episodes. First they do 10 through 6, and then they do 5 through 1. They also have honorable mentions, numbers 110 through 101. The top 100 players lists are often controversial, but we're going to use it for today's fact or fiction. The top 10 players of the top 100 players of 2020 consisted of Derrick Henry, Stephon Gilmore, DeAndre Hopkins, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Michael Thomas, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Donald, Russell Wilson, and Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP. So, fact or fiction, the NFL MVP this year will be one of those 10 players.
So this is a pretty tough question because there's one man on this list that I think probably will win MVP, and that is Drew Brees. So this question is fiction because over the past few years, I think he's been getting better and better, and Drew Brees is a natural leader on his team. I think that he will probably win MVP, and I think it's kind of weird that he's not on this list. But obviously, I think Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes will be in MVP contention, but Drew Brees is my pick for MVP, so this question will be fiction.
Yeah. I also think Drew Brees will win MVP this year. He's my pick. I also think the Saints are also my pick to win the Super Bowl. I think Aaron Donald, in my opinion, would be number one on the top 100 list for me over like at least the past 2 years, if not like the past 3. And I think he would have been top 5, top 10 over the last 4 or 5 years because he's just a beast. But the MVP has seemed to be a mainly offensive award. There's only been 2, I believe, defensive players to ever win the award: Alan Page and Lawrence Taylor. So really, I've heard like theories about it, like maybe they should split it up into offensive MVP and defensive MVP or stuff like that. But I don't know. All right. Finally, for you, fact or fiction: a team in the MLB will win 40 games in this 60-game season. That's equivalent to winning 108 in the regular length 162-game season.
40 games in the 60-game season. I think it's very much possible, but only for a certain few teams. Those 2 teams, in my opinion, being the Dodgers and the Yankees, the 2 best teams in the league, in my opinion, and the 2 teams that will probably meet up in the World Series. I just think that 40 games, it's a big number, but it is reasonable when you think about it. But it really just depends on how those 2 teams play. Obviously, there could be another team to reach that, but I personally think that the Dodgers and the Yankees are the only 2 teams that have a chance to win 40 games or more. Seeing the performance in the opening series for the Dodgers. It was a disappointing opening series, but I think they're just going on off to a slow start. So if they pick up the pace and play like they did against the Astros, I think they could very much win 40 games. And the Yankees are just so stacked; they're full of power hitters. I think both teams could easily, or not easily, but I think both teams could win 40 games. But the question is if they're going to 40 games, because this isn't like a regular season. It's different. Obviously, it's a shorter season, but I think that the stress of coronavirus probably gets some of the players. So I think 40 games isn't out of reach, but I think it'll be difficult for one or for any team to reach.
So you're gonna go fact or fiction?
Um, I'm kind of in the middle, but I would say I'd probably say fact. I think at least one of those two teams are going to win 40 games.
Okay, to give you some context, so as I said, it's equivalent to 108 wins in a regular length season. Last year, no team had 108 wins, but the Astros came close with 107 wins. Dodgers were right behind them with 106 wins, and the Yankees had 103 wins, the Twins having 101. Those were the 100-win teams last year, and then a couple other teams came close. The Oakland A's had 97 wins. The Tampa Bay Rays had 96 wins, and the Atlanta Braves had 97 wins. So some teams came close to 100, but the two main teams who got closest to 108 last year were the Dodgers and the Astros.
When you really look at it, the Dodgers really only got better this off season, so I really think that they could be a team to win over 40 games.
Yeah, I agree.
Now we will be switching roles. I will be asking Brendan the questions while he will be answering these questions. And the first question for Brendan is fact or fiction? Nelson Cruz finishes the season with 20 plus home runs.
Fact. All right. So Nelson Cruz, he right now is playing for the Twins. He is a very, very good player, and he's also a seasoned veteran. He's been playing since 2005. Last year, he had 41 home runs. The season before that, he had 37. Season before that, he had 39. And then the 3 seasons before that, in 2016, 2015, and 2014, he had 3 consecutive 40-plus home run seasons. And then 20 home runs is half of 40, obviously. And 60 games is not half of 162, but just an approximation. So far in 2020, Nelson Cruz currently has 3 home runs. He's been playing very well. I think, personally, I'm going to go fiction here because I think I think no one will hit 20 home runs, honestly. I think maybe there's a chance that someone could, but really, if you do the math, there was no one last year who hit something equivalent to 20 home runs in a 60-game season.
Okay, so you say fiction. Next question, fact or fiction 2. A team that has neither the Lakers nor Clippers sneaks their way into the Western Conference Final.
All right, this one's tough for me because I think it's very possible that a team like the Nuggets could sneak their way in. I think really, if you take the Nuggets out of it, this is I think an automatic fiction for me. I think really they're the only team that I think has a good chance of doing it because we've seen them beat both the teams this season. So I'm overall gonna go fiction because I just think that if you told me last words ever, but that has to be the answer to this question, who's gonna be in Western Conference Finals? I think it will be. I would say Lakers versus Clippers. Like that is my prediction. So I'm gonna stick with that and say fiction on this one.
I agree. I personally don't think there's a chance that another team will make it to the Western Conference Finals. So for me, it's also fiction. And finally, we have the third fact of fiction. Fact of fiction 3: Rams make playoffs.
All right, the Los Angeles Rams. The Los Angeles Rams 3 years ago was their first year with Sean McVay, and they made the playoffs. They won the division, made the playoffs, and they lost to a wild card Atlanta Falcons team. The next season, they go to the Super Bowl and lose in the lowest scoring Super Bowl of all time in a very unimpressive way. And then they end up missing the playoffs last year with a 9-7 record. So a lot of people are thinking that this is the downfall of the Rams, but what I will say is that if they had used this year's playoff format last year, the Rams would have made the playoffs. And also, Sean McVay has a average record of 11 wins in his career. And I think 11-5 is definitely enough to make the playoffs with 3 wildcard teams. I don't think they're going to win the division this year. I think the 49ers will. But, that average win total doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to get that many wins. He obviously, if it's possible, he could get less wins. But last year, the Rams finished 9-7, a winning record with a first-place schedule. And then this year, they're going to have a third-place schedule. So really, it should only do better. And last year, if they would have made the playoffs with the current format, you would think that they should make it this year as well. The Rams' competition for the wildcard spots this year are the Seattle Seahawks, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Green Bay Packers, or the Minnesota Vikings, depending on who wins that division, and the Eagles or the Cowboys, depending on who wins that division. Just my opinion, though, maybe you could make the argument that there are other teams that could be in the race, but in my opinion, it's those teams. So including the Rams, that is 5 teams that will end up being in contention for the 3 wildcard spots, in my opinion, because 2 of those teams will end up winning the division, like I said. So let's assume that the Eagles win theirs and the Vikings win their division. That's the Cowboys, Packers, Rams, Seahawks, and Buccaneers competing. And in my opinion, I feel like the Rams, let's include all 7 teams now. I think the Rams are one of the top 5 teams of those teams. 2 of those top 5 teams will end up winning their division, so that means the Rams would end up making a wild card spot. If I had to rank those teams, I'd put ahead of the Rams, I would put the Seahawks, the Buccaneers, the Eagles, and the Vikings. The Rams slot there at number 5. 2 of those teams will end up winning their divisions, Eagles, Vikings, and then the Rams will be slotted in at the 7th seed. And I think that's very realistic. I think the Rams will probably go somewhere around 9-7, 10-6. I think they'll have a winning record, but I don't think they're going to have anything above 10-6 this year. So I think it's going to be tough for them. But I'm going to go fact, and I say they do make the playoffs this season.
Okay.
All right, let's move into the question of the episode. Jack, how many games should we realistically expect out of the NFL season? We've seen the MLB season get shortened, and we've seen that the MLB's has modeled that their way that they've handled the coronavirus is not the way that really is looking like it's going to be successful. They've already shut down 2 teams in just a couple of games, which is not looking good. Who knows? Maybe no one else tests positive of the entire season, but odds are it'll only get worse. And the NBA is doing the best, but the NFL isn't doing it the way the NBA is doing it, and they're not really going to have the opportunity to unless they, of course, postpone the season start. So I think that the NFL is most closely resembling the way the MLB is doing it. So it's already beginning to look like that they're going to have less than 16 games this season. Originally they're going to have a full preseason, then it was half, now it's none. And some NFL executives are saying that you should expect like 10 to 12 games maximum. So how many games do you think the NFL season will play this year that is a realistic expectation?
So I think that around 10, 12 games, like the executive said, seems like a reasonable amount because football is a physical sport and they're going to be touching each other a lot. But you can make the argument that so is basketball. And I mean, basketball is because there's exposed skin and obviously you're going to be like breathing each other, you're going to be breathing hard. But the way that the NFL is handling this, not like the NBA, could probably make it so they have less games because they're more susceptible to a breakout in coronavirus cases. So I think if they could just handle it better, like do something similar to the bubble that the NBA is doing, we could probably have a full 16-game season. But when you look at the state of the NFL right now in this coronavirus time, I think that 16 games, if we had those, that would be lucky. I think around 10 games would probably be a reasonable amount.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL's got a lot of money, and they can do a lot of stuff with that money that could help them deal with the coronavirus. But in the amount of time they have, the season starts in, it's almost a month now. It's a little over a month. They don't really have enough time to organize like a bubble like the NBA has. So assuming they start on their current start date with the Chiefs versus Texans on Thursday night, in my opinion, I think that assuming they do end up starting on the date, meaning that they do have a season, I think a realistic expectation for games is they're obviously going to aim for 16, but I think it's going to end up they're going to end up at some point before the season starts, they're going to shrink down the schedules in some way. I think they're going to do something like you only played the teams in your conference, eliminating 4 games. So I think 12 games will be the amount of games that we're going to have per team this year.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the JBA All In podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed, and if you did enjoy, remember to show your support. Whatever platform you're watching on, if it's YouTube, like, subscribe, all that. If it's Podbean, follow, do all that stuff. Just show your support if you enjoy. And remember to leave comments down below, suggestions for segment ideas, stories we can cover, whether or not you disagree or agree with something we said, and tell us your opinion. And have a great day.
Goodbye, everybody.